So what does Keanu Reeves decide to do after making the Matrix trilogy? A comic book movie where he plays a character who's supposed to be British and blonde. On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss Constantine. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. And this one's really going to be inspired by. I'm your host, Laramy Wells, and joining me on today's episode is a guest host who's going to have to really speak up this movie. It is Constantine the movie fan, Blake Fowler.
I am feeling inspired by this lead-in to the conversation we're about to have about, let me go ahead and say, one of the cult classic all-time great comic book movies, Laramy. I'm saying it right now to start
You
the
can
show.
say it, doesn't make it true.
In my heart of hearts, it does.
I mean, I'm all for the cult classic bad movies. I mean, Roger Corman's Fantastic Four, the 1990s Captain America.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I'm all for those, but this one,
Well, I'm proud of you for dragging yourself through the rewatch, and I'm going to be even more proud of you as I drag you along this journey of showing you just how great it actually is.
Well, that'll be a fun one. Let's see what happens. So we are talking about the 2005 Keanu Reeves starring Constantine, which actually came out in February 18th. So it was like, hey, you know how you had such a lovely, wonderful Valentine's Day? Let's ruin it with this movie.
Well, let's see. Valentine's Day 2005, I was single and lonely. So this really went with my, motif for that year. I was very happy to watch this one alone in theaters.
Well, this was also directed by a guy named Francis Lawrence, who I was like, okay, well, has he directed anything I've liked?
Yep.
The answer to that is nope.
Oh no.
This was his directorial debut. Are you ready for this? For those of you who are in the younger audience may not be familiar, there used to be these things called music videos, and this guy directed music videos. Now, I will say this. He went on to direct, I'm exaggerating a little bit. He did go on to direct I Am Legend.
Another one, not like a top 10 movie for me, but it's one that I can rewatch over and over and over.
Yes.
I really like I Am Legend.
Yeah, I'm not going to say it's a great movie for me, but...
Right.
Same thing. He also directed all but the first Hunger Games movies.
So he directed all the bad ones?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just making sure we were clear.
Exactly. Now, again, let's talk about this. So, Constantine is a DC comic book character that was created by the great Alan Moore.
Watchmen, he's done great things.
Yes. But Hollywood could not figure his stuff out because this was the third attempt in recent years when this movie came out that they were trying to adapt his work. They had tried it with Johnny Depp's From Hell, which was not good.
Not at all.
And they tried it with, I ain't gonna lie, you want to talk about kind of cult favorite? They tried it with League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
I really like League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
I enjoy League of Extraordinary Gentlemen.
Is it a guilty pleasure movie? Is that what that is?
Yeah, it's a fun one for me.
Okay.
But part of it is that I like things where they take like classic literature, and they make a twist on it. So that's what I kind of like about League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. But Alan Moore wasn't extremely happy with both of those. So when this movie was getting made, he literally told them, do not mention my name. So nowhere in the credits do you see the name character created by Alan Moore.
He's just like, leave me out of it altogether. I want nothing to do with it.
Yeah. He didn't even ask for royalties. Like... He said, look, take whatever you have to pay me for the rights and distribute it among the other people that worked with me on this character.
Okay, knowing what I do know about comic book writers and seeing them tweet and talk all the time about how it's tough to get money and we want to make money, for him to just say, don't give me anything, he must have so far removed from wanting anything to do with this.
Yeah. So again, gives you an idea of where this was already headed. It was already in a deep hole when it started off, and I just think it couldn't climb out of it, but we'll get into that more. I did want to point out, still sticking with the background of the movie and the comic book, is that the movie is called Constantine, even though the comic book, at least prior to the New 52, the comic book was called Hellblazer. What's funny is in both cases, it all comes back to the movie Hellraiser. So the movie is called Constantine because they were afraid to call it Hellblazer because they were afraid people would confuse it with the horror movies, the Hellraiser movies. The comic book is called Hellblazer even though it was meant to be called Hellraiser. But again, I think the movie came out around the same time the comic was getting going, and so yeah.
It's just I appreciate the lesson in homophones essentially right there from you. That was good from a math teacher.
Yeah. So here we go. Let's get into it. Let's go ahead and get into it.
It's already convoluted. Let's keep going.
Yeah, we're gonna have a long conversation just about our first character, and that is, of course, John Constantine himself, played by Keanu Reeves in what was, some might say, his audition to eventually play John Wick.
This is the prototype pre-John Wick, just facing demons. He's just fighting demons in this case. Yeah. He's still John Wick, though.
Yeah, and again, it's that fighting demons that I'm going to have a problem with, and we'll hit that again. So the character of John Constantine actually first appeared in the Swamp Thing comics. In fact, when Hellblazer eventually came out in 1988, it was from the pages of Swamp Thing. So he is a spin-off of Swamp Thing. He first appeared in Swamp Thing number 37 back in June of 1985. In that one, he's more of just this kind of supernatural private investigator is right. The way they don't give him much of a background or any type of story building. He's just investigating things and finding out about things, and he creates a little bit of a partnership with Swamp Thing. The Hellblazer comic debuted in January of 1988, so 3 years later. And of course, that was Alan Moore, the great Alan Moore, along with Stephen R. Bissette. So again, Stephen R. Bissette, congratulations. You get the royalties off of this.
You get the credit for this.
Because it did not go to Alan Moore. But let's talk about casting. So they casted Keanu Reeves. I have nothing against Keanu Reeves. Nothing at all.
Good so far.
I like Keanu Reeves in most things. I think he had a transition period where he tried to get away from being, Bill and Ted Keanu Reeves, because he had that virtuosity, or not virtuosity. What was the one he did?
Oh, you're talking about? I can't think of the name. You shouldn't have said it.
Johnny Mnemonic.
There you go.
That was it. Johnny Mnemonic. He had that movie. He tried to do Shakespeare with Much Ado About Nothing,
which was Much Ado About Nothing.
Yeah, but he finally got the Matrix movies, and he was coming back, and he's become a great actor and even individual.
We are living in the age of the Keanu-sance, if you will, right now.
But here's my problem. My problem is that Keanu Reeves looks nothing like John Constantine.
Okay, you got me there. You're 100% correct. If you go look at the comics traditionally, John Constantine is blonde. He is, this British private investigator, if you will. And I think you might agree that he bears a striking or at least passing resemblance to somebody pretty famous.
Oh, no, he's meant to look like the rock musician Sting. And that's not even like a coincidence. The story goes that Alan Moore asked his artist, it's like, what type of character do you want to draw? And they said, well, we would really like to draw one that looks like Sting. And so they drew a character that looked like Sting. And I mean, he does. If you go to Swamp Thing number 37, there is a full headshot, and it looks like Sting from the 80s.
Thank goodness not anymore. But you're right, 100%. It is dead on ringer for Sting from the 80s.
Yeah. So no, yeah. So he looks like Sting. He's blonde. When he starts off, it was the 80s, so he kind of had blonde flowing hair that eventually went to kind of more a kept,
it's got like a crop
shorter cut
kind of thing going on.
Yeah. He has the tan olive colored trench coat, which Keanu Reeves, they went with a black trench coat. I don't know why all the black, because he just came out of the Matrix where there was all this black.
Yeah,
so
a lot of black. He's also fighting his way through hell on earth. So it goes with that. Well, we'll talk about fighting in a minute again. Okay.
Well, and my thing is in the comics, in the Hellblazer comics, John does typically look like he is he's not a well-kept guy. Now, when he started off, he did.
It looks like he's been through it.
But once we hit Hellblazer, Swamp Thing, he looked very, sophisticated and well-kept. But once we hit Hellblazer, he looks like a guy who has literally been through hell.
Yeah.
But he doesn't look like a reject from the movie Reservoir Dogs.
Oh.
Which is what Keanu Reeves looks like.
All right, so I can't help the wardrobe choices. I think probably the Matrix played a big part in, Keanu's coming off this all black, the one thing, and we're just going to keep him in that same motif. But if the wardrobe's what you're getting hung up on, then we're just going to have to take you off of that and show you all the other wonderful things. Because Laramy, is there a better guy to play someone who has been through hell and back than an emotionless Keanu Reeves? Someone who just doesn't care anymore. Because that's the guy you got.
Oh, well, now see, if you gave me some time, I would have found you somebody else in 2005.
Sting.
And my thing is right now we're sitting in 2021, and we have a John Constantine on television right now who also voices the character in most of the DC animated movies. Matt Ryan, who hands down is John Constantine from the comics.
He looks just like the comics. I'll give you that much.
He acts like him too.
Yeah, I do miss, and so that's one of the things about Keanu. I did miss the sarcasm of Constantine. There wasn't a whole lot of snark and sarcasm to Keanu's Constantine, which I think would have elevated this to a point where maybe it could have been bearable for a lot of people.
Well, and that's part of it too, because in the comics, Constantine, he's a con artist.
Right.
Yeah, he's a jerk. And he's always finding ways to manipulate the supernatural beings, the humans, everybody that he comes across, so that he can get what he needs and what he wants, which they do play with that selfishness in this character. That's the whole reason they say why, he can't earn himself back into heaven. But this is just not John Constantine. John Constantine in the comics does everything he can to avoid a fight, to avoid having to battle. He's
borderline a coward in the comics.
Yeah. He wants to do something so that he can, if anything, hit and run.
To be
which
fair,
he does even in the storyline that this movie is as loosely based as possible. That's what he does throughout the whole thing. When he confronts the devil in this storyline in the comics, he tricks the devil and then runs.
Yeah, to be fair, though, 2 hours of Keanu Reeves tricking people and running away wasn't going to do much for anybody either. So it's kind of a lose-lose there, maybe, I guess.
Yeah, and part of it is also the way that they promoted this movie, because what genre does it fit under?
Yeah, this is, Laramy, this is your classic horror, thriller, noir, detective, superhero, romance with a hint of undertone fighting your way back through hell genre. It's pretty simple, straightforward.
Yeah. And again, we're getting a lot into the movie. We'll get back to that later. Let's get back to our characters. Sorry. Let's move on. Chaz Kramer, which I don't know why they had to change the name. It's Chaz Chandler in the comics. But Chaz Kramer, for some reason, in the movie, even though I think the only time you ever see his last name is on his tombstone.
In the post-credits scene. Spoiler alert for later.
We'll get into that. Played by Shia LaBeouf. Again, why? I don't know.
Don't you understand the popularity of Even Stevens, Laramy?
Yeah, but this was after. This was
or Holes.
I mean, this was like Transformers Shia LaBeouf error.
This was not error. ERROR.
Yeah, but just like in the comics, Chaz. I mean, he appears in Hellblazer #1. He is John's kind of sidekick. But he's really just his cab driver, just gets him around. Their relationship in the comics, they're roughly the same age versus in this movie. Obviously, Chaz was much younger. But in the comics, they're both probably about 40-ish. And Chaz does not take anything from John. If John gets too, negative towards Chaz or anything, Chaz steps up to him, and Chaz will punch him in the face if that's what John needs. And Shia LaBeouf's version of this would not.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad that for half of the movie, or the middle part of the movie even, Shia LaBeouf's not there. Chaz just kind of isn't around as he runs around with a couple other characters. So that works for me. I see Shia a little beginning, a little at the end, and that's plenty of Shia LaBeouf for me.
Yeah, I don't know how I felt about doing the kind of mentor-mentee relationship. I mean, they even talk about how he's like Robin, or I did like I also like the fat guy to the little guy, clearly talking about Robin and Little John.
Yep.
But I mean, again, in the comics, it's just they have a relationship, but it's more of that like two buds who will never say they like each other, but they clearly do like each other, but they're always bickering. And I don't know, it just, again, this is a movie, you will hear me say this throughout this entire episode, this is a movie that went, oh, hey, here's a comic book. We're just going to list the characters. Okay, hey, this Chaz guy doesn't have a last name. Let's just give him a last name, even though he does have a last name. You could clearly, in my opinion, no matter what you look at, I know there are, the documentaries, the making of and all that, where you hear that they worked with Vertigo, which was the version of the part of DC that Hellblazer was under. Yeah, the label. Because Vertigo was for their darker comics. That they worked with people from Vertigo, and they worked with some of the people from DC, and, they were trying to be true to the comic. They were not. They were not true to the comic. And we'll get more into that, but it's starting off already with the characters, and Chaz is just another prime example. And then that brings us to Gabriel, the angel Gabriel. Gabriel first appeared in Hellblazer number 64 in April of 1993, which is, to my knowledge, his first appearance.
I thought it was the Bible, not Gabriel's first appearance?
Well, we're talking about the character.
Oh, okay. Sorry. My bad. All right.
And there's been variations. There's one version of Gabriel that actually appeared in the Teen Titans back in December of 1976. Not sure if this is supposed to be the same Gabriel, because there is the whole multiverse thing as well to factor in here. But to associate it with Constantine, Gabriel first appeared in Hellblazer number 43 in July of 1991. In the comics, Gabriel is a very large man.
A behemoth.
Yeah, because there's a scene where he stands up. He's sitting the entire time John's talking to him, but then when John kind of rubs him the wrong way, he stands up, and I mean, John is looking at his chest.
Yeah, big. And they go a completely different direction here.
They do. They casted Tilda Swinton. Even though, as you're hearing us say, that he is clearly a man in the comics, they kind of play Gabriel as androgynous in this.
Right.
Played by Tilda Swinton, but she is wearing a suit. They don't really give her masculine or feminine characteristics or qualities. So that I didn't mind that. I had no problem with that. I don't have any problem.
Yeah.
It's not the Gabriel from the comics, but I didn't mind the portrayal.
So do you think the casting of Tilda Swinton then was purposeful? Because you got Keanu Reeves, who's not exactly this intimidating guy, and I don't know the perception of how, quote unquote, believable it would be for a superhero movie regardless, but how believable it's going to be for him to go up against someone like Gabriel from the comics. So you cast Tilda Swinton for a more formidable opponent.
Well, for the character that they created, I think it worked fine. And I have no problem in cases like this because, and again, this is a much broader, much bigger topic. A lot of these characters were created when pretty much every character in comic books were male, white. Right.
True.
The females were the females, the damsel in distress. I mean, yeah, you had Wonder Woman and some of the superheroes, but there was a clear, this is what characters look like in comics. Mm-hmm. So I have no problem with changing a character like this to be this androgynous type character. And Tilda Swinton is always amazing in everything she does, even though sometimes she creeps me out. But
she's super creepy, right? That's another podcast, but yes, super creepy from time to time.
But no, she plays it well. I love even the reveal at the end because she kind of plays. It's almost like she plays it very playful when it's revealed that she's been behind everything and she's really the true villain. Again, I say she. We don't know if Gabriel is a he or a she.
Right.
But when Gabriel is found out to be the actual villain and mastermind behind everything, again, Tilda Swinton was great. I have no problem with the change of Gabriel, even though, again, Constantine and Chaz, major problem with changing that from the comics. Gabriel, I'm okay with. You can change it up a little bit.
Well, I think because of how well Tilda Swinton played it, you can get away with changing that.
There is one character that is probably the closest to the comic, and that is Papa Midnight, played by the actor who I will never attempt to pronounce his name.
Dijman Hunsu?
Yeah. Or I think, as I have always referred to him ever since I became aware of him, he is Amistad. Yeah.
Okay. Fair point.
Another amazing actor. Ill. You have a very hard name. But amazing actor. He plays Papa Midnight. Look is a little different, but I was okay with the look. He first appeared in the Hellblazer comics in #1. He's this entity, this
immortal
persona.
Being.
Yeah, you believe he is immortal. Yeah. You do find out in the comics that he was born in the 18th century. We don't know how or why. He's a master of voodoo. He also kind of he walks that line where he's not necessarily the good guy, but he's also not necessarily the bad guy. Sometimes he works against Constantine in the comics. Sometimes he works with Constantine. I did like the portrayal of Papa Midnight in this. I did like that you could tell that he and John didn't have a great relationship, but then when they worked together at the end, you could tell, they've had a long relationship.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of history there between those two. And I wanted, watching it, I would like to have seen more Papa Midnight, to be honest with you. I enjoyed that character to the point where I wish there had been a little more story building with that character in that world, just because of how good he is in that role. And because I wanted to see some more of the history or some flashbacks or just a little more screen time with those two.
Yeah, I definitely don't want flashbacks, but I agree.
No flashbacks for you? Okay, that's fine.
I'm not a big fan of flashbacks in movies.
Like flash forward.
Or you can flash sideways like they did on the show Lost.
Oh, nice. Oh, another podcast.
There you go. All right. We're not done with characters that are from the comics, but there are a lot of characters in this that were not from the comics, made particularly for the movie. We'll hit those really quick. First off is the kind of the bad guy you have to get through to get to the main bad guy, and that was Balthazar, played by rocker Gavin Rosdell from the band. From the band Bush.
He did not want to come back down from that cloud he was on, Laramy. So he did a good job in portraying Balthazar as well as he possibly could. But I will say he did seem like he snuck through Patrick Bateman's wardrobe to get dressed for this. For those of you who know American Psycho.
Yeah, he was fine for the part. I thought it worked. Like I said, there wasn't anything to base it off of because Balthazar is not from the comics. But the character was written well enough and he performed it well enough that you almost would think that character is from the comics.
He performed it well. I could have done without some of the dialogue, though. I think at one point in time he refers to John Constantine as finger licking good. And I was like, that's a little much for me there, Balthazar.
Hey, to each his own.
The Colonel.
Yeah. We also have the main female lead, Rachel Weisz, who did double duty, playing twins Isabel and Angela Dodson. Of course, Isabel is the one who the story is all centered around, that she commits suicide at the beginning, and then Angela is the detective. Let me ask you a question. Yep. Why was she a detective? Why was she a cop? What benefit did it serve to anything that happened in the movie?
Yeah, I found myself asking the same question, other than she flashes her badge a couple of times to get to talk to people. But there's really, she should have just been the sister wanting to figure out her other sister, twin sister's death. That would have played better to me.
Because her partner, this small little bit role, that cop could have still been there.
Right.
And when John shows up to Father Hennessy's death, you still have that same moment of him going, instead of asking Rachel Weisz, what is he doing here? He could have just looked at John and said, what are you doing here?
It could have been much simpler. And I don't want to say the story was too convoluted because of this one simple point, but it does throw, I guess, a little bit of a wrench if you're just wanting to watch a much smoother film. She should have been the twin sister trying to avenge or find out her sister's death and let that be the end of it. It was almost a pointless plot point for her to be a cop.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't, because if they had done something where she had to use her ability as a cop to find out some information, and I get the idea of you don't need another character that would do that, but there was never any of that. There was never any of her doing that, so I just didn't get it. You did have two other small characters that were kind of working with John that, again, felt like they should have been from the comics, but both of them created just for the movie, and that was Father Hennessy and Beeman. I really would have thought Beeman was out of the comics.
He seems like a solid comic character, right?
Yeah, but nope, both of them made for this movie, never existed before, so...
Poor Beeman gets done in by flies, which I don't know if that's irony or coincidence, but either way, tough ends for both those guys. Father Hennessy, also a little irony in his death if you watch the movie and see how he goes. I won't spoil it for anybody, but...
Already spoiled, so if people are listening to this... They should know by now.
You mean to tell me there's people that everyone's already seen Constantine, Laramy? I thought this was like a hidden treasure film for everyone.
He's 16 years old.
Yes. So, no, Father Hennessy, drowns himself in alcohol. I don't know if that was intentional or not with the naming of the character there. And then Beeman with his insect fly death. Great
Did they
characters.
Have been bees?
They should have. This could have been a prequel to Candyman.
I got to tell you, though, I have a thing about the eye. And so to see the fly crawling out of his eyelid did freak me out.
See, there's a part horror genre there for you.
All right, and final character I want to talk about is the Devil, played by Al Pacino. Hold up, wait. Nope, that's another Keanu Reeves movie.
Hold on, I got to fix my notes now. Hold on a second.
No, this time the Devil was played by Peter Stormare, who, again, this was a great casting, a great choice. Here was the Devil being, or in the comics he's referred to as the First of the Fallen, and I'm going to get a little bit more into that, but he first appeared in Hellblazer number 42, which again is where this is kind of credited from, and we'll get into that when we get into the moving panels in the next segment. But Peter Stormare, I think, was great. He did great, but in terms of the character, there is a television show, Netflix show called Lucifer, and it stars Lucifer Morningstar. For those of you not familiar, DC makes it very clear that these are two different characters. Okay?
So within the multiverse of superheroes, there's also a multiverse of Satans.
Yeah. Well, okay. And like I said, I'm kind of running this thin line, which is why I put him at the end, because we'll go into the next segment of the moving panels. Even in the Hellblazer comic, there are multiple devils. Now, you could separate, one of them is Satan, one of them is Beelzebub, one of them. But DC has made it clear that Lucifer Morningstar is completely separate. Now, the movie doesn't make that clear because Gabriel actually calls him Lucifer.
It refers to him as Lucifer, and Keanu refers to him as Lou, which I'm assuming is short for Lucifer.
But like I said, in the comic book, he is just known as the First of the Fallen. And then there's the second and the third. We'll get into that. Lucifer, which is the Lucifer Morningstar, is supposed to be an archangel who actually led the revolt against God, whereas this Satan, this devil that Peter Stormare is playing, that character is supposed to be God's creation who disappointed him, and he casted him down. Whereas Lucifer was supposed to be an archangel who revolted, and he is actually, in DC, he's the fourth of the fallen. So you've got the Peter Stormare devil, then you've got the second of the fallen, the third of the fallen, which is like Beelzebub, and I honestly think if you look in the comics, the other one is supposed to be like Death, like the Grim Reaper. Okay. And then you would have Lucifer Morningstar. So just wanted to make that clear. But back to the portrayal in the movie, I admit I absolutely loved the white suit and how that
so good,
visually it being a contrast, going, ooh, the devil wearing white. Like, that's something you don't see.
Yeah, the contradiction, not just between the devil wearing white, but then the devil wearing white, and then all of a sudden you get down to the shot of his feet, and they're just like dripping tar. Like that contradiction and contrast.
Yeah, which is the first thing you see. The first thing you see are his feet. Yeah. But yeah, the tar covered feet, which it's not pointed out in the movie. Of course, there's a lot of stuff that's not really made clear in the movie, but I couldn't help but think, oh, that's got to be a reference to the fact that Jesus there's all the stories in the Bible about Jesus having the clean feet and Mary washing his feet. Yep. And his feet getting washed while he's hanging on the cross and all of that. So I had to think there was a contradiction of that. Part of me wondered if it also wasn't the fact that he has to, Satan, the devil, whoever Peter Stormare's is, he has to dirty the earth so that he can step on it.
Walk upon it, yeah.
Yeah, and so, again, I did like this portrayal of the devil, of Satan. Again, Peter Stormare, usually always great in everything that I've seen him in. He will always be the Russian in Armageddon for me. So
he's like fantastic as that. I don't know if it's a character actor, but he's just fantastic in all the smaller parts, I guess, that he ends up getting. He stole those scenes from me, sitting there with Keanu as Lucifer, as the devil. Yeah, I mean, I was kind of just drawn into watching him play that part, and I don't know, probably one of the better characters in the film for me.
All right, let's get into the moving panels of this. I will admit, you could tell that they at least read one storyline of Constantine, and that was Hellblazer 41 through 46, also known as the Dangerous Habits story arc. That was from May to December of 1991. This was written by Garth Ennis and was drawn by Will Simpson. I mentioned them because, once again, congratulations, guys. You got Alan Moore's money.
Ding, ding, ding.
In the Dangerous Habits story arc, this is where John finds out that he has terminal lung cancer, and the entire storyline deals with John trying to figure out a way to heal himself, then having to come to terms with the fact that he's dying and how he's going to wrap up some of his story, some of his relationships. And so we did get that. So the whole lung cancer thing is from the comics. It is from this story arc. It is all his doing, which they make clear in the comic that he did it to himself from smoking. I think they even say in the comic, I actually think it's Gabriel that says it in the comic, says something along the lines of, you've smoked 30 cigarettes a day since you were 17. What did you expect?
Yeah. And it goes it lends itself to showing his selfish nature. Like everything he's doing is to try and save himself, even from death itself. With the lung cancer. So yeah, he's a selfish guy, and I mean, who's not trying to cheat death out here though? Give the guy a break. Yeah.
And then they also pull kind of his relationship with the devil, which kicks off in this comic, in the story arc. Like we mentioned, the devil appears in Hellblazer 43. But it's not to retrieve John. It's actually to retrieve a friend of John's. So John goes to meet another sorcerer, magician friend of his, but finds out that he's also dying. And they decide to have one little hurrah and drink. And what you end up finding out is his friend has learned how to take a well that is holy water and turn it into stout. And so he's turned it into stout. He and John are drinking, and then his friend dies. Well, then the devil shows up at the door, and he comes to retrieve. He finds out that his friend has made a deal that he could have his soul as long as he retrieved it before midnight on the day he died. Then John says, well, it's 5 minutes to midnight. He then says, you've got a few minutes. Why not share a stout with me?
Let's have a drink.
Yeah. And so the devil agrees. They take a drink. But then, of course, because it is made from holy water, it then makes the devil start to do his little, oh no, I'm melting type thing. John then pushes him into the little well of holy water and then runs off. And, of course, midnight passes and he realizes his friend is going to get to go to heaven. But that was important because that then establishes, okay, now the devil wants payback, and when John dies, the devil is making sure that he is going to personally take John's soul.
It's never made super clear in the movie.
It is not.
Why the devil wants John Constantine so bad. It's a lot of things you have to imply and assume.
There is so much in this movie that there's no explanation to.
There is. Okay, but that's the magic of it, of John Constantine. Defies and does not require explanation, just the willingness to believe.
But now let's get into this. This was a character that we didn't talk about because she doesn't appear in the movie, although she is in the movie. All of her scenes were pretty much cut.
Yeah, here's something with no explanation for sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And it was a character by the name of Ellie, who is from the comic books. And she's in this story arc. And Ellie, who is a half-breed, a demon, she was played in the movie by Michelle Monaghan. She does still appear in the movie. She is actually, if you're paying attention and realize it's Michelle Monaghan, she is actually the one who realizes that John has put holy water into the sprinkler system, which, let me point out again, the not making sense. Apparently, for those of you at home who were curious, in order to make holy water, you just have to place a cross inside of water. If you do that, it becomes holy water.
Yeah, checking my recipe card, and that is correct. That's all that's required.
But the thing about her in the movie, if you see the deleted scenes, you realize she's the one to tell John all of this information. Mm-hmm. She kind of serves... Yeah, she kind of serves as an informant, which she does in the comic as well. When her and John speak in the comic, you can kind of get that impression too, that she likes John. They kind of play with this, do they have a relationship, or have they had a relationship type thing? But she at least sees him as a fun toy to play with, but she is serving as kind of an informant to let him know what's going on in hell. So why they cut that character out, I am not sure at all.
It could have pulled a lot of things together. Well, maybe not a lot of things, but it could have pulled some of the plot together as to how he's getting this information, how he knows some of the things that he knows, and where to be and where to go and what to do in the story. And I hate that they cut her out because on a completely unrelated string here, Michelle Monaghan, one of my favorite actresses. If you haven't seen True Detective, everybody go watch it. She's fantastic in it, but I would have liked to have seen more of her in this movie.
Yeah, and I think I get because if you see the deleted scenes, there's definitely, like I said, the relationship aspect between the two. And I think they just decided later, as you alluded to, Constantine is a loner.
Yeah.
And you don't want to give him any type of relationships that are true relationships. And I think the toying with even him and Angela, where will they ever kiss? Because they get
a couple of times where they get real close, but don't ever do anything. He's just using people.
Yeah, which is clear for the Ellie character.
Yes.
So yeah, but again, but here you go. So moving on, in the Dangerous Habits story arc, you do have where he's trying to figure out a way to get cured, and it's actually Ellie that suggests that he go to who they refer to as the Snob, which you then find out is Gabriel. Now, what I did like is that his meeting with Gabriel in the comics is almost visually the same as it is in the movie, where he goes to this help me here, because I wasn't clear with the movie. Where is Gabriel when they meet in the movie?
So, from my understanding, what I've watched enough times to glean, it appears like in a Roman Catholic, like a church library.
I thought it was like a library. Yeah. Because we see Angela there too. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. She goes and meets with the priest, and then there's Gabriel. And you're right. Visually, it is not necessarily shot for shot, but like the comic book where they're in front of this big giant fireplace, albeit I think the comic book is a nightclub where they are.
It's like a society club, like a gentleman's club.
There you go.
But yeah, so visually they did pull that straight from the panels of the comic. And, it's the fireplace, and Gabriel's wearing the suit, and they have the two chairs that they're sitting in talking to each other. So, yeah, a lot of similarities there. But he's still turned down by Gabriel. That happens the same. And it's for the same reasons, that everything he does is for personal reasons. It's not for the greater good. And so Gabriel's not going to help. Now, it is funny to mention, in the comic books, Gabriel is later tricked by John. As we've alluded to, that's what the character does.
Of course.
He's tricked by John into Gabriel actually having a little fling with a succubus. And the succubus ends up ripping out Gabriel's heart, which leads to Gabriel being banished from heaven. So that's how it happens in the comic, versus in the movie, it was finding out that Gabriel was planning the whole Mammon birth, and so God wasn't on Gabriel's side anymore, and that's how he or she becomes human.
Yeah, I can see them skipping the succubus. That probably would have added just a little too much more to the plot than there already was.
Yeah, no, I was fine with that too. But Gabriel doesn't last long in the Hellblazer comics. Gabriel's actually killed by the devil not too long into these comics. So Gabriel's not a big character. Like I said, there's other versions of Gabriel. Gabriel popped up later in the New 52 when the comic was officially called Constantine instead of Hellblazer, several years later. But that's it. Now, let's talk about the ending, because the ending in the comic is completely different from the ending in the movie. The ending in the movie, of course, is more of the heroic ending where John is dying. He decides to slit his wrist in order to bring Satan to him, because he knows Satan's going to personally come to retrieve his soul. And then he ends up asking for the saving of Isabella's soul. And then you find out that God saw that as a true act of selflessness and decides to grant him his entry into heaven, which then leads Satan to go, oh, no, you're mine. And in this, you want to talk about horrible effect.
Yeah, it was a bad effect, dude.
Reaching his hand into Constantine's arm, when all of a sudden his arms become very tiny and rubbery looking, and he rips out the cancer, and so Constantine is going to live, and Satan's just saying, hey, you'll screw this up again and condemn your soul to hell once more, and you'll be mine.
Yeah, tells him he's going to give him a chance to prove why he belongs in hell.
Yeah.
So
in the comic, John once again cons the devil. He cons the devil because, again, as we already established, the devil is after John really just as revenge for tricking him with the holy water earlier in that story. But John gets an idea that he is going to meet, like I said, devil's called the first of the fallen. John decides to conjure the second of the fallen, and he makes a deal and sells his soul to the second of the fallen. He then conjures the third of the fallen, and he makes a deal, and he sells his soul to the third of the fallen. And so at the end, John, same thing, he slits his wrist, the devil shows up, and I will say this, that shot of the devil's feet coming in with the whatever it is dripping off, that is the exact panel from the comic.
Yep. Super cool shot.
Yeah, and the devil's coming to retrieve it, but then John says, hold on, you're not alone. And then the second shows up, and then the third shows up, and pretty much what ends up happening is they realize that they can't all have his soul, and if one of them takes his soul, it causes a imbalance in hell that would then lead to a war between the three. And so after a lot of dialogue, I'm going to say this goes on for pages in the comic. After a lot of dialogue, they pretty much say, well, we have to heal his wrist cuts, and we even have to heal him of his cancer, and we have to let him live.
Can't let him die now.
Until they can get it all figured out. Because, he has sold his soul to the second and the third, and then the first is laying claim on the soul for insulting him. And so until they can figure it out, which is pretty much what John goes, look, as far as I'm concerned now, I'm going to live until you guys can figure this out, because even when the day comes that I do die, I still win because I caused y'all to go to war.
Yeah, it just goes to show how the character is written in the comics, the manipulation that he's able to go through and work his way through to get what he wants in the end, which again, I can understand why people wouldn't like this version of him in the movie, because he's very much not that way. I do hate that they missed out on that aspect of his personality.
And then the final panel of that comic is Constantine flipping off the three, which of course this John did as he thought he was going to heaven. He turns
he was
around,
I'm in, man.
Yeah, and he flips off the devil, going, "Yeah, I'm going to heavens. Yeah, I got you." But again, same thing in the comic. All right, another thing that was really the main story that they pulled. There were a couple of other things that I found. For instance, Hellblazer #1, the very opening couple of pages from Hellblazer #1 is this guy who opens up a box, and whatever is in that box has affected him, and now he's all of a sudden hungry, and he's running off to find food, but no matter how much food he eats, it's not satisfying him, and he eventually just withers up and dies. And if you're going, that wasn't in the movie, no, but it's similar to what happens to Father Hennessy.
Right. You can't have Father Hennessy eat his way to death. You got to have him drink his way to death with a name like that. If he was Father Hot Dog, yeah, you could have him eat himself to death.
Well, and not only that, but they establish from the time we meet him that he is a drinker. I mean, he has that flask.
Heavy drinker. Heavy drinker.
Of course, they play off it's because of the visions, and he's trying to cut them back. I will say I like that visual of him downing the bottles, but no water's coming out or no liquid's coming out. But then when he sets it down, you see the liquid coming out of it.
That was well done.
Yeah, and then to find out he actually liquid has been coming out, and he essentially drowns himself.
He drowns himself in alcohol. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but again, that was pretty close, straight out of the comics. The only other thing I could find from my research was really nothing. It was something I just put together, and that's in the movie. The very first time we see Constantine, he's exorcising a demon from a girl. I don't know if that was meant because his background in the comics is supposed to be a failed exorcism of a girl in which the girl ultimately died, and so he's trying to redeem that in all of his actions from there on. But other than that, there really wasn't an awful lot in terms of the comic.
Yeah, I certainly think there's strings to be connected from that, where he pulls the demon out of the girl at the beginning of the movie. And in the comic books, yes, he is trying to earn his way back into heaven because of this botched exorcism, whereas in the movie, his own life is the one that he took and botched and is trying to earn his way back. So a little connection, good connection to see and find there.
But, I mean, again, I'm leading to you because you are a bigger fan of this. Do you know of anything else that connects with the comics?
Not anything. Now, see, so as big a fan of the movie as I am, I haven't gotten super into the original Hellblazer comics, the New 52 Constantine. I did read and worked my way through. But as far as to those original issues back in the 80s and early 90s, I would have to agree with you. This is very loosely based on a lot of that.
Yeah, I don't know. Because after that, it really falls apart for me. You, like I said, you do have the Dangerous Habits storyline that is kind of the basis. You do have the characters, but it's the basis of the characters. It's not the characters. Other than that, this is an action movie with a supernatural element.
So you're in for the first 10 minutes and you're like, I'm out. I'm done. That's all I want to see.
Kind of. I mean, as cool as that gun looks with the cross and then the giant ammo that they put in it.
Canister they've got on there.
Yeah, as cool as that looks, that's not something the comic book character is going to be wielding. Even the brass knuckles with all of the Latin carved on it and the crosses on each knuckle, that's not something the comic book character John Constantine is going to use. So I'll give you the holy hand grenades. I love the holy hand grenades.
Also,
I'll
the holy water in there. Awesome.
Yeah, I'll give you those.
Think about it like this, if you will, if you can take a second here. We're at a time in 2005 where the superhero movie doesn't necessarily have its footing. Like it doesn't. Yeah, you've got Spider-Man, you've got some of the X-Men movies that have been out, but like the superhero genre as we know it today isn't quite there yet. And so you're allowed to, or they felt like, I guess they're allowed to, Mr. Lawrence here, to take some chances, to kind of bend the genre, to twist it, and to make it something people are going to want to watch. And at this point in time, in the mid 2000s, people are wanting to watch action movies. Like, it's a big time for action films. And so I can understand them wanting to put an action spin or twist on it. And it does leave a lot to be desired as far as the comic book goes. I will give you that. But the time period, I think, has to be looked at, because we're on the cusp of Batman Begins. We're on the cusp of a new era of superhero movies at this point in time. But they still aren't quite sure what to do with John Constantine.
Yeah, and I agree. So this is right at, for those of you who kind of want a time frame here, so Blade, which is, in my opinion, the movie that slowly started the rise of the modern superhero movie. The Blade came out in 98. And then in the 2000s, we got X-Men. And we got Spider-Man, the Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi Spider-Man. Right here in the middle of the 2000s, this movie just kind of falls into a little divot. And then it takes off with Batman Begins. 3 years later, we would get Iron Man and the kickoff of the MCU. And the year after this, we'd get Superman Returns, which, again, not a great movie, but it still was kind of that going into that push, that lead into where we're going to go with a new era of superheroes. And so this does fall in. I'm going to go ahead and point this out, though. This movie probably could have fallen into that same realm that Blade did if it had come out 6 years earlier.
Ooh. So do you think there would have been a different reception on your end and other folks' ends had it come out during that time frame?
Yes, because again, let's look at this. So 1998 Blade comes out, and here you have a rated R comic book movie of a comic book character that no one knew was a comic book character. X-Men came out, everybody remembered X-Men were comic book, and they're clear superheroes. When Spider-Man came out, we knew that was a clear superhero comic book. Blade, people didn't know that he was a Marvel character. Constantine, people didn't know that he's a DC character. And so you put this movie out in 99, which now we run into problems with Keanu Reeves. That was when he's starting off The Matrix. But if you put this movie in 99, let's look at some other movies that came out in 1999. Stigmata. The Ninth Gate. End of Days. So here we have 3 movies that came out in 1999 that feature supernatural. They're horror action movies. They even tie into religion, and especially End of Days with Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so you've got all of this. You put that movie in this group, in my opinion, this movie would stick out from those 3.
So Constantine then just happens to be a victim of time, so to speak.
I think so. I mean, again, I'm watching it now and I'm still not a huge fan of it, but that's why I said it kind of just fell into a little divot of, okay, superhero movies are on a slow increase, so there's Constantine, keep going, it's just there.
It kind of falls. And if you remember, Spider-Man 3 comes out a little after this, and I think that movie and Constantine kind of signal the end of the, I'm gonna call it, quote, weird or ungenred superhero film. Like this, just, we don't really know what it's doing or what it wants to be. It wants to be a comedy, it wants to be a drama, it wants to be supernatural. And so then you get into the more formulaic MCU, whatever DC's trying to do. You start to see these patterns emerging for these movies now that create the blockbusters they are today.
I will say, though, this movie did, and I will admit, I did not know this until I rewatched it for this podcast. Before the days of where we expected post-credit scenes out of superhero and comic book movies, we actually get one in this movie.
There it is. I love the positivity, Larry. That's what I'm talking about. We've brought you around finally.
Oh, no. Okay. I'm brought around on elements of this movie. And I know we're getting right to our final decision, but the after credit scene, here's my question to you. Do you think they had in mind that they would do a sequel?
I think they saw the X-Men franchise. I think they saw the Spider-Man franchise. And I think they thought, they saw Blade. We can launch this into something else. And I think they had intended to do that. And then it just completely flopped. Like, it just belly flopped. Critics and audiences alike. And I think that kind of put the kibosh on it for a while until, spoiler alert, reached the present day. And there's rumblings, Laramy, of a sequel. I know you're excited.
Thrilled.
But thank goodness. At this point in time, I think thank goodness, because it looked like Shia LaBeouf is on the, quote, rise at this point in time, is going to be an action star maybe. And I really would have hated to have seen a story focused on him as like his angel helper. I couldn't have done it. I wouldn't have been able to do it.
And then he made Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
No, Laramy, don't talk about it. Don't hurt me like that.
All right, so let's get into our final decision. I think I've made mine pretty clear. But again, on this show, we do the final decision the way you would treat it if it was a comic book. Do you bag it? Do you stack it? Or do you trade it? Blake, go right ahead. I'm not 100% that you're going to say bag it, but let's find out.
Okay, so not to jump the shark before I give my decision here, but let me talk about a couple things real quick. I do appreciate and enjoy several aspects of this movie, one of them being the portrayal of hell itself. Usually we see it as like this super fiery brimstone. This is almost like a parallel universe to our world that we're struggling through in the afterlife should you end up there. And I really like that aspect, not to get too deep into the religion part of the movie and what have you, but I do like those aspects of it. I like Keanu Reeves just in general, so I enjoy seeing him be emotionless on the screen. And that, along with just the fact that going into it, you know you're not going to see an Oscar-worthy film. It's not going to be something that's award season worthy. It's a fun, sit back and enjoy popcorn movie. I'm going to stack it, but I'm going to stack it probably at the bottom of my stack. It's not going to be one I visit very often, but it's going to be one that when I do visit it, I enjoy it thoroughly. I love flipping through it and seeing it. Maybe I'll read a couple pages, so to speak, and then do something else or play on my phone and then finish watching it or reading it. But I'm stacking it. I'm going to hold on to it. I don't want to get rid of it, but it's definitely not worthy of a bag.
Okay. Interesting. I really thought you might have said bag it for that one. Yeah. So I'm not going to disagree with you on some elements of that.
Okay.
Keanu Reeves, as far as his performance, it works. It's just he's not John Constantine.
Okay. Fair.
I'm so glad they didn't try to make him British. As I mentioned earlier, Much Ado About Nothing, he does attempt to play with a British accent, and it didn't work. So I was happy with that. Maybe if they dyed his hair blonde, it would have looked weird. So, okay. I still don't get why they went with the black trench coat instead of the tan olive colored trench coat. I think that would have been a good color contrast to the world. I agree with what you talked about with hell. To me, it was like a nuclear bomb had just gone off.
Yeah. Yep.
And you're seeing it's just a constant aftermath of a nuclear holocaust. I wish they would have shown us a little bit more of heaven. You can kind of tell heaven is also a version of...
Yeah, again, those parallels, you're playing with.
Yeah, because you could see like what looked like the skyscrapers of Los Angeles.
Yep.
In the clouds and all. So I don't hate this movie. I want to make that clear, but I still am going to say trade it.
Okay.
Again, it's decent. I do not ever think of this movie or just go, I want to watch Constantine, unless it's brought up. You know, when they did start talking about after the success of John Wick and all that, and they talked about doing a sequel to Constantine now that superhero movies are bigger, it did make me think about the movie again, but I wasn't going out to watch it. It wasn't until you and I agreed to do this show that I went back and watched it. It's just not one that I desire to see again. I do own it. As big of a comic book fan as I am, I try to own anything related to comic books. I do own it on DVD. I never upgraded it to Blu-ray or anything. I just own an old DVD copy of it. And I did watch one of the special features, and in one of the special features, one of the producers said that it's the spirit, quote unquote spirit of the character. And I was like, well, that's exactly what it is. This is not John Constantine. It's the spirit of John Constantine. You're using the idea of John Constantine. And then they cut to the director, and the director literally says, I had no idea who this character was. And that right there keeps it as a trade it for me. You cannot bring in people making a movie about a comic book who are not familiar with the comic book. So it is what it is. Again, it's not one of the things I desire. My biggest positive of this movie is the people at Truth really need to promote this because it is one of the greatest anti-smoking campaigns ever seen in movies.
Yeah, nobody wants Satan coming up from the underworld to pull cancer out of their lungs, so just don't smoke at all, people.
All right, Blake, anything else you want to share? Any more thoughts about Constantine that you want to...
Laramy, I'm just super appreciative that you decided to take the journey with me to the underworld and back and talk about Keanu Reeves as John Constantine. As always, I enjoy being on here, and can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, and look, I'm game for going down the route of the Matt Ryan Constantine, even though it was a one-and-done series on NBC. They got canceled, I just think, too soon. Of course, he got to later play the character on the Arrowverse's Legends of Tomorrow. He's gotten to voice the character, and so we've got some animated stuff we can always come back to. I love the character. I am a John Constantine fan of the character.
Absolutely.
This movie just didn't do it justice for me, and I'll bookend it with that. All right, thank you, Blake, and thank you, everybody, for listening. Please, I am begging, go to Apple Podcast, leave us a review, give us a 5-star rating. It really helps promote the show by doing that. Share our stuff on social media. It's a great way to get this show going. We have fun doing it. I hope you have fun listening to it. Again, I'm sure I speak for Blake and all my other co-hosts that, we enjoy this show and we hope you're enjoying it. But as for today, for Moving Panels, I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.